Question 1. The assessment process reveals that a prominent Alabama-based musician, Dixie Starr, has expressed significant concerns about performing a series of scheduled concerts in a region experiencing severe and unpredictable weather patterns, citing potential safety risks for herself and her audience. Her manager, who operates under Alabama entertainment law, must determine the best course of action regarding the upcoming tour. Option A. Immediately consult with legal counsel specializing in Alabama entertainment law to review the tour contract, specifically its force majeure clause, and discuss potential options with Dixie Starr based on legal advice. Option B. Advise Dixie Starr that the tour will be canceled unilaterally by the management company due to the weather, without further contractual review or discussion with the artist. Option C. Suggest that Dixie Starr perform the concerts but at a significantly reduced fee to compensate for the perceived risks, without consulting legal counsel. Option D. Inform Dixie Starr that the contract is binding and she must perform the tour as scheduled, regardless of her safety concerns, to avoid financial penalties. The correct answer is A. Immediately consult with legal counsel specializing in Alabama entertainment law to review the tour contract, specifically its force majeure clause, and discuss potential options with Dixie Starr based on legal advice. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves a potential breach of contract due to unforeseen circumstances, requiring a delicate balance between upholding contractual obligations and addressing the artist's legitimate concerns. The manager must navigate Alabama contract law principles, specifically regarding impossibility or frustration of purpose, while also maintaining a positive and ethical relationship with the artist. Failure to handle this appropriately could lead to legal disputes, damage to the artist's career, and reputational harm for the manager. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves open and honest communication with the artist, followed by a thorough review of the contract's force majeure clause and consultation with legal counsel specializing in Alabama entertainment law. This approach is correct because it prioritizes transparency and adherence to legal frameworks. Alabama contract law, like most jurisdictions, recognizes that unforeseen events can sometimes excuse performance. However, the specific wording of the contract, particularly the force majeure clause, will dictate the available remedies. Seeking legal advice ensures that any proposed solution is legally sound and protects both parties' interests within the bounds of Alabama law. This proactive and informed strategy minimizes legal risk and fosters trust. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to unilaterally decide to cancel the tour without consulting the artist or reviewing the contract. This fails to acknowledge the artist's contractual rights and the potential legal implications of such a decision under Alabama contract law. It bypasses the necessary contractual review and legal consultation, potentially leading to a breach of contract claim by the artist. Another incorrect approach is to pressure the artist to perform despite their genuine concerns about safety and well-being. This disregards the artist's physical and mental health, which could be grounds for constructive discharge or other legal claims if the artist feels coerced into a dangerous situation. Ethically, it is also unacceptable to prioritize financial gain over an artist's safety. A third incorrect approach is to ignore the situation and hope it resolves itself. This passive stance is professionally negligent. It allows the situation to escalate, increasing the likelihood of a more severe contractual dispute and potentially damaging the artist's reputation and future earning potential. It also demonstrates a lack of proactive management and commitment to the artist's career. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making process that begins with understanding the contractual obligations. This involves a detailed review of the agreement, paying close attention to clauses related to performance, cancellation, and force majeure. Simultaneously, open and empathetic communication with the artist is crucial to understand the full scope of their concerns. The next step is to seek expert legal counsel to interpret the contract in light of Alabama law and the specific circumstances. Based on this legal advice and contractual understanding, a collaborative solution can be developed with the artist that is both legally compliant and ethically sound, prioritizing the artist's well-being and the long-term success of their career. Question 2. Stakeholder feedback indicates that an Alabama-based music festival organizer is seeking to protect its brand name and logo, which are used to identify and promote its annual event, and the various entertainment services it provides, including ticketing and artist booking. The organizer also has a separate initiative where independent musicians can join an association to collectively market their performances under a unified banner, using a distinct emblem. Considering the specific intellectual property protections available under Alabama law, how should the organizer's legal counsel best advise on the classification and protection of these distinct branding elements? Option A. Advise that the brand name and logo used for the festival and its services are service marks, and the emblem used by the Independent Musicians Association is a collective mark. Option B. Advise that the festival's brand name and logo are service marks, and the Musicians Association emblem should be treated as a standard trademark for marketing purposes. Option C. Advise that both the festival's brand name/logo and the Musicians Association emblem are simply trademarks, and standard trademark registration will suffice for both. Option D. Advise that the festival's brand name and logo are trademarks, and the Musicians Association emblem should be registered as a collective trademark. The correct answer is A. Advise that the brand name and logo used for the festival and its services are service marks, and the emblem used by the Independent Musicians Association is a collective mark. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires distinguishing between different types of intellectual property rights within the context of entertainment law in Alabama. Misidentifying a trademark can lead to improper registration, inadequate protection, and potential legal disputes, impacting the financial viability and brand integrity of the entertainment entity. Careful judgment is required to apply the specific definitions and protections afforded by Alabama law to service marks and collective marks. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves accurately identifying the mark based on its function and the entity it represents. A mark used to identify and distinguish services offered by an entertainment company, such as concert promotion or talent management, is a service mark. This aligns with the Alabama Code's definitions and protections for service marks, ensuring proper registration and enforcement under state law. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to classify a mark used to identify services as a trademark without further qualification, while a service mark is a type of trademark. Failing to specify it as a service mark in Alabama's regulatory framework can lead to confusion regarding its specific protections and registration requirements, potentially leaving the entity's service offerings inadequately protected. Another incorrect approach would be to treat a mark used by a group of independent artists to collectively promote their work and maintain quality standards as a standard trademark. This overlooks the distinct nature of collective marks, which are used by members of an association or other organization to indicate membership or to certify the origin, material, mode of manufacture, quality, or other characteristics of services or goods. Alabama law, like federal law, recognizes these distinctions, and misclassification would fail to secure the appropriate protections for such a collective endeavor. A further incorrect approach would be to assume that any mark used in the entertainment industry is automatically a service mark, regardless of its specific function. This oversimplification ignores the nuances of trademark law and the possibility of other types of marks, such as collective marks, being relevant. Proper classification requires a detailed understanding of how the mark is actually used by the entity. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach trademark identification by first understanding the nature of the business or entity seeking protection. They must then analyze how the proposed mark functions. Does it identify goods, services, membership, or certification? Consulting the relevant sections of the Alabama Code concerning trademarks, service marks, and collective marks is crucial. This involves examining definitions and registration procedures to ensure the mark is classified and protected according to its specific purpose, thereby safeguarding the client's intellectual property rights effectively. Question 3. The efficiency study reveals that a new independent musician in Alabama is eager to share their original songs on various online platforms to build an audience. They are unsure about the legal protections available for their work and how to best safeguard their creations. Considering Alabama's entertainment law landscape, what is the most appropriate initial step to ensure the musician understands their rights and responsibilities regarding their original musical compositions? Option A. Advise the musician that all their original creations are automatically protected by copyright and that no further action is required for legal enforcement. Option B. Focus on implementing digital rights management, DRM, technologies to control access to their music online, without first explaining the underlying copyright principles. Option C. Provide a comprehensive explanation of copyright law in Alabama, detailing what constitutes a copyrightable work, the exclusive rights granted to copyright holders, and the purpose of copyright in encouraging artistic creation and protecting creators' interests. Option D. Recommend that the musician freely share their music online without concern for copyright, as long as they are not directly selling the music. The correct answer is C. Provide a comprehensive explanation of copyright law in Alabama, detailing what constitutes a copyrightable work, the exclusive rights granted to copyright holders, and the purpose of copyright in encouraging artistic creation and protecting creators' interests. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential conflict between a local Alabama musician's desire to share their original music online and the need to protect their intellectual property rights. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the musician's creative aspirations with the legal framework governing copyright, ensuring they understand their rights and responsibilities without overstepping boundaries or incurring unnecessary risks. Careful judgment is required to provide advice that is both legally sound and practically beneficial for the artist. The best professional approach involves clearly defining copyright under Alabama law and explaining its purpose in fostering creativity and protecting creators' exclusive rights. This includes educating the musician on what constitutes copyrightable material, original works of authorship fixed in a tangible medium, and the exclusive rights granted to copyright holders, reproduction, distribution, public performance, public display, and creation of derivative works. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core of the musician's situation by providing a foundational understanding of copyright law as it applies in Alabama, empowering them to make informed decisions about sharing their music and understanding the legal protections available. It aligns with the purpose of copyright law, which is to encourage the creation and dissemination of creative works by granting creators control over their use. An incorrect approach would be to advise the musician that anything they create is automatically protected by copyright without any further action, implying that no registration or specific notice is necessary for enforcement. This is professionally unacceptable because, while copyright protection arises automatically upon creation, the ability to enforce those rights, especially in a legal dispute, is significantly strengthened by formal registration with the U.S. Copyright Office. Furthermore, failing to mention the importance of copyright notices can leave the musician vulnerable. Another incorrect approach would be to suggest that the musician can freely share their music online without any consideration for copyright, as long as they are not directly selling it. This is professionally unacceptable because it ignores the exclusive rights granted by copyright, including the right of public performance and distribution, which are implicated by online sharing. Even non-commercial sharing can infringe upon the copyright holder's rights if done without permission. A third incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the technical aspects of digital rights management, without first establishing a clear understanding of the underlying copyright principles. While DRM can be a tool, it is secondary to understanding what rights are being protected in the first place. This is professionally unacceptable, as it prioritizes a technical solution over the fundamental legal framework, potentially leading to a misunderstanding of the musician's actual rights and the limitations of DRM. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the client's goals and concerns. This is followed by identifying the relevant legal framework, in this case, Alabama and federal copyright law. The next step is to explain the core legal concepts in clear, accessible language, tailored to the client's situation. Finally, professionals should outline practical strategies for protecting intellectual property and advise on potential risks and benefits, ensuring the client is empowered to make informed decisions. Question 4. The efficiency study reveals that a new Alabama-based entertainment company, specializing in interactive virtual reality experiences, is seeking to register a unique service mark. The company's legal counsel is considering the most effective strategy to secure trademark protection within Alabama. What is the best course of action to ensure successful registration and robust protection under Alabama law? Option A. Submit a broad and general description of the entertainment services offered in the application to the Alabama Secretary of State, believing this will provide the widest possible scope of protection. Option B. Rely on a quick online search of general business directories to confirm no other company uses a similar name, and then proceed with filing the application with the Alabama Secretary of State, assuming the novelty of the service will ensure registration. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive search of both Alabama state trademark records and federal USPTO records for similar marks used in connection with entertainment or virtual reality services. Assess the distinctiveness of the proposed mark, and then file a precisely worded application with the Alabama Secretary of State. Option D. File the trademark application immediately with the Alabama Secretary of State, assuming that the unique nature of virtual reality entertainment will prevent any potential conflicts with existing trademarks. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive search of both Alabama state trademark records and federal USPTO records for similar marks used in connection with entertainment or virtual reality services. Assess the distinctiveness of the proposed mark, and then file a precisely worded application with the Alabama Secretary of State. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a thorough understanding of the Alabama trademark registration process, specifically the nuances of identifying and securing rights for a unique entertainment service. Missteps in this process can lead to significant financial losses, legal disputes, and damage to the brand's reputation. The core of the challenge lies in accurately assessing the registrability of the mark and navigating the procedural requirements set forth by Alabama law and relevant federal guidelines that govern interstate commerce. The most effective approach involves a comprehensive pre-filing search and a clear understanding of the distinctiveness of the proposed mark. This includes conducting a thorough search of existing Alabama state trademarks and, importantly, federal trademarks registered with the United States Patent and Trademark Office (USPTO) that might cover similar goods or services, even if the business operates primarily within Alabama. This proactive step helps identify potential conflicts and assess the likelihood of registration success. Following this, a properly drafted application, accurately describing the services and demonstrating the mark's distinctiveness, should be filed with the Alabama Secretary of State's office. This aligns with the principles of trademark law, which prioritize preventing consumer confusion and protecting the rights of mark owners. The Alabama Code, particularly provisions related to trademarks and unfair competition, implicitly supports this diligent approach by aiming to prevent the registration of confusingly similar marks. An approach that relies solely on an informal online search without consulting official databases or seeking legal counsel is professionally unacceptable. This failure to conduct a comprehensive search risks overlooking prior registrations or common law rights, leading to potential infringement claims and the rejection of the application. It bypasses the due diligence required by trademark law to ensure the mark is not confusingly similar to existing ones. Another professionally unsound approach is to assume that because the entertainment service is novel, the mark will automatically be registrable without a thorough examination of its distinctiveness and potential for confusion with existing marks. Trademark law requires marks to be distinctive, either inherently or through acquired distinctiveness, and to avoid confusion with prior marks. Simply being novel does not guarantee registrability. Finally, filing an application without a clear and accurate description of the services offered is a critical error. Vague or misleading descriptions can lead to the rejection of the application or, if registered, limit the scope of protection, leaving the mark vulnerable to challenges. The Alabama Secretary of State's office requires precise information to properly assess the application. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the client's business and the proposed mark. This should be followed by a rigorous search of all relevant trademark registers, state and federal, an assessment of the mark's distinctiveness, and a careful drafting of the application. Consulting with an attorney specializing in intellectual property law in Alabama is highly recommended to navigate the complexities of trademark registration and ensure compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. Question 5. Governance review demonstrates that an Alabama-based independent musician is seeking to license their original musical compositions for use in films and television programs produced in Canada and the United Kingdom. The musician's primary concern is ensuring their intellectual property rights are robustly protected across these territories, given the international scope of the proposed licensing agreements. Considering the implications of the Berne Convention and the TRIPS Agreement on U.S. copyright law, Which of the following approaches best safeguards the musician's interests? Option A. Advise the musician to secure new copyright registrations specifically for Canada and the United Kingdom, assuming this is the primary mechanism for international protection under the Berne Convention and TRIPS Agreement. Option B. Confirm the musician's copyright ownership under U.S. federal law and then analyze how the Berne Convention and TRIPS Agreement, as implemented through U.S. federal statutes, extend these rights and establish minimum standards for protection and enforcement in Canada and the United Kingdom, advising on licensing strategies that align with these international obligations. Option C. Rely solely on the musician's existing Alabama state-level copyright registration, asserting that this provides sufficient foundational protection for international licensing under the Berne Convention and TRIPS Agreement. Option D. Recommend that the musician grant broad, unrestricted licenses to all potential international licensees, trusting that the Berne Convention and TRIPS Agreement will automatically provide recourse if any infringement occurs in Canada or the United Kingdom. The correct answer is B. Confirm the musician's copyright ownership under U.S. federal law, and then analyze how the Berne Convention and TRIPS Agreement, as implemented through U.S. federal statutes, extend these rights and establish minimum standards for protection and enforcement in Canada and the United Kingdom, advising on licensing strategies that align with these international obligations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an Alabama-based entertainment law firm advising a client on international music licensing. The core difficulty lies in navigating the complexities of international copyright law, specifically how the Berne Convention and TRIPS Agreement impact the rights and obligations of an Alabama artist seeking to license their work globally. Ensuring compliance requires a nuanced understanding of how these international treaties are implemented and enforced within the United States, and how they interact with Alabama's specific legal landscape concerning intellectual property. Misinterpretation or oversight can lead to significant legal and financial repercussions for the client, including infringement claims and loss of revenue. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive review of the client's existing copyright protections under U.S. law, followed by an analysis of how the Berne Convention and TRIPS Agreement extend these protections internationally. This approach correctly recognizes that while international treaties establish minimum standards, their practical application and enforcement are often governed by national laws. For the U.S., this means understanding how federal statutes like the Copyright Act of 1976, as amended, incorporate treaty obligations. The firm must then advise the client on specific licensing strategies that align with these international frameworks, ensuring that the client's rights are adequately protected in foreign territories where their music might be used. This proactive and legally grounded strategy minimizes risk and maximizes the client's potential for successful international exploitation of their work. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves solely relying on the client's existing Alabama state-level copyright registration. While state law can offer some protections, international copyright is primarily governed by federal law and international treaties. This approach fails to acknowledge that international treaties like Berne and TRIPS operate at a federal and international level, superseding state-specific registrations for cross-border protection. Another flawed approach is to assume that the Berne Convention and TRIPS Agreement automatically grant the client the same rights and enforcement mechanisms in every foreign country as they have in Alabama. This overlooks the principle of national treatment within these treaties, which requires member countries to grant foreign creators the same rights as their own citizens, but also acknowledges that enforcement procedures can vary significantly by jurisdiction. Without understanding these nuances, the client's rights could be inadequately protected. A third incorrect approach is to focus exclusively on obtaining broad international licenses without first verifying the client's underlying ownership and the scope of their rights under U.S. copyright law. This could lead to the client licensing rights they do not fully possess, or failing to secure the most advantageous terms due to a lack of clarity on their foundational intellectual property position. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a hierarchical approach to legal analysis. They should first establish the client's rights under domestic law, in this case, U.S. federal copyright law, which is influenced by Alabama's specific context where applicable to the artist's creation. Subsequently, they must analyze how international treaties, such as the Berne Convention and TRIPS Agreement, modify, or extend these rights on a global scale. This requires understanding the principles of national treatment and minimum standards. Finally, they must translate this understanding into practical, actionable advice for international licensing, considering the specific legal and commercial landscapes of target territories. This systematic process ensures comprehensive protection and compliance. Question 6. System analysis indicates that an Alabama-based music festival company, Dixie Rhythms Fest, is planning significant international expansion and requires robust trademark protection for its festival name and logo across several European countries, including Germany, France, and Spain, as well as in Canada. Given the company's limited in-house legal resources and desire for a cost-effective solution, what is the most professionally sound approach for Dixie Rhythms Fest to pursue international trademark registration? Option A. Advise the client to abandon the Madrid Protocol and pursue separate national trademark applications directly with the trademark offices of Germany, France, Spain, and the Canadian Intellectual Property Office. Option B. File a single international trademark application through the United States Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO, under the Madrid Protocol, designating Germany, France, Spain, and Canada. Option C. Inform the client that filing an international application under the Madrid Protocol automatically grants trademark rights in all designated member countries, simplifying the process to mere administrative notification. Option D. Instruct the client to file an international trademark application directly with the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, without first ensuring a U.S. trademark application or registration is in place. The correct answer is B. File a single international trademark application through the United States Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO, under the Madrid Protocol, designating Germany, France, Spain, and Canada. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an entertainment lawyer in Alabama advising a client seeking international protection for their music festival's trademark. The core difficulty lies in navigating the complexities of international intellectual property law, specifically the implementation of the Madrid Protocol, while ensuring compliance with both international agreements and the practical realities of trademark registration in multiple foreign jurisdictions. The lawyer must balance the client's desire for efficient and cost-effective protection with the legal requirements and potential pitfalls of international filings. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves advising the client to utilize the Madrid Protocol system through the United States Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO, as their designated office. This approach is correct because the Madrid Protocol allows for the filing of a single international application to seek trademark protection in multiple member countries. By filing through the USPTO, the client benefits from a streamlined process where their U.S. trademark application or registration serves as the basis for the international application. This method is generally more cost-effective and administratively simpler than filing separate applications in each target country. The justification is rooted in the principles of international cooperation and efficiency embodied by the Madrid Protocol, which aims to simplify and reduce the cost of obtaining international trademark protection. Alabama practitioners must be aware of how U.S. adherence to the protocol facilitates international filings for their clients. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to advise the client to abandon the Madrid Protocol and pursue individual national trademark applications in each desired foreign country. This is professionally unacceptable because it ignores the significant advantages of the Madrid Protocol in terms of cost savings and administrative ease. While individual filings are a valid method of obtaining trademark protection, they are significantly more complex and expensive, especially when seeking protection in numerous countries. This approach fails to leverage an established international treaty designed to simplify the process for trademark owners. Another incorrect approach is to advise the client to file an international application directly with the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, without first establishing a basis in the United States. The Madrid Protocol requires that an applicant have a basic mark, either an application or a registration in their home country or country of origin, to file an international application. Filing directly with WIPO without this prerequisite would result in the application being deemed invalid, leading to wasted time and resources. This approach demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of the Madrid Protocol's procedural requirements. A further incorrect approach is to advise the client that the Madrid Protocol automatically grants trademark rights in all member countries upon filing. This is a critical misrepresentation of how the protocol operates. The Madrid Protocol facilitates the application process, but each designated country still has the right to examine the application according to its own national laws and grant or refuse protection. The international application is essentially transmitted to the trademark offices of the designated countries for their independent review. Failing to explain this crucial aspect can lead to unrealistic expectations and potential legal challenges for the client. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach international trademark protection by first understanding the client's business objectives and geographic scope of desired protection. They should then thoroughly research the relevant international treaties and national laws of the target countries. In the context of the Madrid Protocol, professionals must guide clients through the process of establishing a basic mark and filing through the appropriate national office, in this case, the USPTO for a U.S.-based client. It is imperative to clearly explain the benefits, limitations, and procedural steps involved, managing client expectations regarding the automatic grant of rights. A thorough understanding of the specific requirements of the Madrid Protocol and the national laws of the designated countries is essential for providing sound legal advice. Question 7. Benchmark analysis indicates a marketing firm in Alabama is planning an advertising campaign featuring a deceased, iconic musician's likeness. The firm has identified a photograph of the musician from their prime and intends to use it prominently in print and online advertisements for a new line of audio equipment. The musician passed away 20 years ago. The firm has not contacted the musician's estate or heirs for permission, operating under the assumption that publicity rights do not extend indefinitely after death and that their use is unlikely to be challenged. What is the most prudent and legally compliant approach for the Alabama-based marketing firm to take regarding the use of the deceased musician's likeness? Option A. Commission a legal opinion from an Alabama attorney specializing in intellectual property, but proceed with the advertisement if the opinion is favorable, even if it suggests a moderate risk of infringement. Option B. Immediately seek written consent and a formal license from the musician's estate or rightful heirs before using the likeness in any advertising materials. Option C. Utilize the likeness, arguing that the advertisement is a form of tribute and therefore constitutes fair use or a transformative work, exempting it from publicity rights. Option D. Proceed with the advertisement, as the musician has been deceased for 20 years, making it highly improbable that their right of publicity is still protected under Alabama law. The correct answer is B. Immediately seek written consent and a formal license from the musician's estate or rightful heirs before using the likeness in any advertising materials. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires navigating the complex and evolving landscape of the right of publicity in Alabama, specifically concerning the unauthorized use of a deceased celebrity's likeness for commercial gain. The core difficulty lies in determining the scope of protection afforded to the deceased's estate and identifying the appropriate legal recourse. Alabama law, like many jurisdictions, has specific statutes and common law principles governing this right, and misinterpreting these can lead to significant legal liability and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to balance the commercial interests of the advertiser with the rights of the deceased's heirs or estate. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves conducting thorough due diligence to ascertain the current legal status of the deceased celebrity's right of publicity in Alabama. This includes researching Alabama statutes, relevant case law, and any specific provisions regarding the duration and assignability of the right of publicity after death. If the right is still protected and owned by the estate or heirs, the professional course of action is to obtain explicit written consent and a license from the rightful rights holders before proceeding with the advertisement. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to Alabama's legal framework protecting an individual's likeness and identity from unauthorized commercial exploitation. Obtaining consent ensures compliance with the law, avoids potential litigation for infringement, and upholds ethical advertising standards by respecting the legacy and rights of the deceased and their beneficiaries. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that the right of publicity extinguishes upon death and proceed with the advertisement without seeking permission. This fails to acknowledge that Alabama law, through statutes like the Alabama Right of Publicity Act, may extend protection for a specified period after death, and that the right can be inheritable or descend to the estate. Proceeding on this assumption risks direct violation of the act and potential legal action by the estate. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the fact that the celebrity has been deceased for a significant period, without verifying the specific duration of protection afforded by Alabama law. While the duration of post-mortem publicity rights varies by state, a general assumption without specific legal research is a dangerous oversight. Alabama law has specific provisions regarding the duration, and failing to confirm this can lead to infringement. A third incorrect approach is to argue that the advertisement is transformative or constitutes parody, thereby falling outside the scope of publicity rights. While transformative use and parody can be defenses to right of publicity claims, they are often fact-specific and subject to rigorous legal interpretation. Without a clear and established legal precedent in Alabama supporting such a defense for this specific use, proceeding on this basis is speculative and carries substantial legal risk. The advertiser would need to demonstrate that the use is not primarily commercial exploitation, but a genuine artistic or communicative expression that incidentally uses the likeness. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This begins with identifying the potential legal and ethical risks associated with the proposed use of a deceased celebrity's likeness. The next step is to conduct comprehensive legal research specific to Alabama's right of publicity laws, including statutes and case law concerning post-mortem rights, duration, and inheritable nature. If the research indicates potential protection, the primary objective should be to secure proper authorization. This involves identifying the rightful rights holders, estate, heirs, and negotiating a licensing agreement. If authorization cannot be obtained, the professional must advise the client against proceeding with the advertisement in its current form, or explore alternative creative strategies that do not infringe on publicity rights. Ethical considerations, such as respecting the legacy of individuals and avoiding deceptive or exploitative practices, should guide the decision-making process alongside legal compliance. Question 8. Benchmark analysis indicates that emerging entertainment ventures in Alabama often face challenges in securing robust intellectual property protection for their brands. Considering the legal landscape for trademarking in Alabama, which of the following strategies offers the most comprehensive and legally sound approach to safeguarding a new entertainment company's brand name and logo from infringement? Option A. Rely solely on common law trademark rights established through the use of the brand name and logo within Alabama. Option B. Delay any trademark registration efforts until a potential infringement dispute arises. Option C. File only for Alabama state trademark registration with the Alabama Secretary of State. Option D. Conduct a thorough trademark search, file for federal registration with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and simultaneously pursue registration with the Alabama Secretary of State. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough trademark search, file for federal registration with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and simultaneously pursue registration with the Alabama Secretary of State. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in Alabama's entertainment industry, protecting intellectual property rights for a new creative work in a competitive market. The challenge lies in balancing the desire for rapid market entry and brand recognition with the legal requirements for establishing and enforcing trademark rights under Alabama law. Missteps can lead to costly disputes, loss of exclusive rights, and damage to the brand's reputation. Careful judgment is required to select the most legally sound and strategically advantageous path for trademark protection. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a multi-pronged approach that prioritizes establishing strong, defensible rights early on. This includes conducting a thorough trademark search to identify potential conflicts with existing marks in Alabama and nationally, followed by filing an application for registration with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO, for federal protection, and simultaneously pursuing registration with the Alabama Secretary of State for state-level protection. This dual registration strategy offers the broadest possible protection, leveraging federal law for nationwide rights and state law for specific Alabama enforcement. The USPTO registration provides prima facie evidence of ownership and validity nationwide, while Alabama registration offers additional recourse within the state and can be particularly useful for local enforcement and dispute resolution. This comprehensive approach aligns with the principles of trademark law, which aim to prevent consumer confusion and protect the goodwill associated with a mark. Incorrect approaches analysis. Relying solely on common law trademark rights by simply using the mark in commerce within Alabama without formal registration is a significant legal vulnerability. While common law rights exist, they are geographically limited to the areas where the mark is actually used and are much harder to prove and enforce compared to registered marks. This approach leaves the mark susceptible to being challenged by a later filed, federally registered mark, even if that mark is used in a different part of Alabama. Filing only for Alabama state trademark registration without pursuing federal registration is also an incomplete strategy. While state registration offers some protection within Alabama, it does not provide nationwide rights. This means that if the entertainment company expands its reach beyond Alabama, or if a competitor in another state adopts a similar mark, the Alabama registration offers little to no protection against such infringement. Waiting to file for any trademark registration until a dispute arises is a reactive and highly disadvantageous approach. By this point, significant investment may have been made in a mark that is already infringing on another's rights, or the mark may have become diluted due to widespread, unauthorized use. This delay can result in the inability to register the mark, forcing a costly rebranding, or lead to protracted and expensive litigation to defend rights that were not properly secured from the outset. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Alabama's entertainment industry should adopt a proactive and comprehensive strategy for intellectual property protection. This involves understanding the dual nature of trademark protection in the United States, federal and state, and the benefits of each. A systematic process should be followed. First, conduct thorough clearance searches to assess registrability and avoid infringement. Second, prioritize federal registration with the USPTO to secure nationwide rights and strong legal presumptions. Third, consider state registration with the Alabama Secretary of State to supplement federal rights and facilitate local enforcement. Finally, maintain vigilance through ongoing monitoring for potential infringements and promptly address any issues that arise to preserve the integrity and value of the trademark. Question 9. Quality control measures reveal a discrepancy in the reported duration of copyright protection for a popular blues song composed in Alabama in 1975. Which of the following assessments most accurately reflects the applicable copyright term under U.S. federal law? Option A. The copyright term is determined by Alabama state law, as the composition was created within the state. Option B. The copyright term expired after the initial 28-year period, as renewal was not automatically granted. Option C. The copyright term is the life of the composer plus 70 years, provided the work was published before 1978, and the renewal term was secured or extended by subsequent legislation. Option D. The copyright term is the life of the composer plus 70 years, as this is the current general term for all copyrighted works. The correct answer is C. The copyright term is the life of the composer plus 70 years, provided the work was published before 1978, and the renewal term was secured or extended by subsequent legislation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in accurately determining the duration of copyright protection for a musical composition created in Alabama. The complexity arises from the interplay of federal copyright law and potential state-specific nuances, particularly concerning the historical context of when the work was created and first published. Misinterpreting these durations can lead to significant legal and financial repercussions, including infringement claims and loss of licensing revenue. Careful judgment is required to navigate the specific provisions of the Copyright Act as applied to works created within a particular time frame. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves consulting the U.S. Copyright Act, specifically focusing on the duration provisions applicable to works created and published during the period in question. For works created on or after January 1, 1978, the general term of copyright protection is the life of the author plus 70 years. If the work was created before January 1, 1978, the duration is more complex, involving an initial term and a renewal term, often requiring careful examination of publication dates and renewal filings. Given the composition was created in 1975, the analysis must consider the pre-1978 rules, which typically involved a 28-year initial term and a potential 28-year renewal term, totaling 56 years, provided renewal was properly filed. However, subsequent amendments to the Copyright Act extended these terms. The most accurate approach is to determine if the work was published before 1978, and if so, whether the renewal term was secured or extended by subsequent legislation, such as the Copyright Term Extension Act of 1998. This requires verifying the publication date and checking for any renewal filings or statutory extensions that would apply to a work created in 1975. Incorrect approach is analysis. Applying the current general term of life of the author plus 70 years without considering the pre-1978 creation date is a significant regulatory failure. This approach ignores the historical context and the specific provisions of the Copyright Act that governed works created and published before the major revisions. It would incorrectly extend protection beyond what was legally mandated at the time of creation and renewal. Assuming the copyright expired after the initial 28-year term, without accounting for renewal rights or subsequent statutory extensions, is also a regulatory failure. The Copyright Act explicitly provided for renewal terms, and subsequent legislative actions have extended these terms for eligible works. Failing to investigate these possibilities means underestimating the actual duration of protection. Relying solely on state law or common law principles for copyright duration is a fundamental error. Copyright protection in the United States is primarily governed by federal law, the U.S. Copyright Act. While states may have laws related to intellectual property, copyright duration is a federal matter. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach when assessing copyright duration. First, identify the governing law, which for copyright in the U.S. is federal. Second, determine the date of creation and, if applicable, the date of first publication. Third, consult the U.S. Copyright Act provisions relevant to those specific dates. For works created before January 1, 1978, this necessitates understanding the initial term, renewal requirements, and any subsequent legislative extensions. Fourth, verify all relevant facts, such as publication status and renewal filings, through official records if necessary. This methodical process ensures compliance with federal law and protects the rights of copyright holders and licensees. Question 10. Implementation of a new marketing campaign for a local Alabama craft brewery, Dixie Brews, involves creating a series of humorous advertisements featuring a fictional character named Colonel Cottonmouth, who is depicted as a disgruntled former employee of a rival, larger brewery, Southern Spirits. The advertisements for Dixie Brews' new IPA, Rebel Yell, show Colonel Cottonmouth attempting to sabotage Southern Spirits' production, often referencing their flagship lager, Magnolia Gold. Southern Spirits' legal counsel has sent a cease and desist letter, alleging trademark infringement and dilution of their Magnolia Gold mark. Dixie Brews' marketing team estimates that the Rebel Yell IPA will account for 15% of their total sales for the upcoming fiscal year, and the Colonel Cottonmouth character is projected to be featured in 80% of their advertising spend. Southern Spirits' Magnolia Gold mark is considered a very strong and distinctive mark within Alabama. Dixie Brews' legal team is considering how to respond. They need to assess the potential for consumer confusion and the strength of their parody defense. Dixie Brews' legal team calculates the likelihood of confusion score, LCS, using the following formula. LCS equals similarity of marks asterisk commercial nature of use asterisk strength of original mark / degree of transformative use, where similarity of marks 0, 8 high similarity in sound and connotation commercial nature of use 0, 9 significant portion of sales and advertising spend strength of original mark 0, 95 very strong and distinctive degree of transformative use 0, 3 parody is present but still directly references and mocks the original product. Calculate the LCS for Dixie Brews campaign. Option A, 108. Option B, 216. Option C, 806. Option D, 270. Correct answer is C, 806. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the rights of trademark holder with the public interest in creative expression, specifically parody, within the framework of Alabama law. Determining whether a parody infringes on a trademark involves a nuanced analysis of consumer perception and the likelihood of confusion, which can be difficult to quantify. Careful judgment is required to avoid both stifling legitimate artistic commentary and allowing unauthorized commercial exploitation of another's brand. The best approach involves a quantitative assessment of potential consumer confusion, focusing on the degree of similarity between the original mark and the parodic use, the commercial nature of the parodic use, and the strength of the original mark. This method aligns with Alabama's approach to trademark infringement, which, like federal law, centers on the likelihood of confusion. Specifically, Alabama courts would consider factors such as the similarity of the marks, the similarity of the goods or services, the strength of the plaintiff's mark, evidence of actual confusion, the defendant's intent in adopting the mark, and the sophistication of the purchasers. A quantitative analysis allows for a more objective evaluation of these factors, particularly when assessing the commercial impact and potential for dilution. For instance, if a parodic use is purely for commentary and not for commercial gain, the likelihood of confusion is significantly reduced. Conversely, if the parody is used in a way that suggests endorsement or affiliation, even if humorous, it could lead to consumer confusion. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the subjective intent of the parodist to create humor. While intent can be a factor, it does not negate the possibility of consumer confusion. If a parodist's humorous intent results in a mark that is so similar to an existing trademark that consumers are likely to believe the parody originates from or is sponsored by the trademark owner, then infringement may still occur, regardless of the parodist's comedic aspirations. This approach fails to adequately address the legal standard of likelihood of confusion, which is objective and consumer-focused. Another incorrect approach is to assume that any use of a trademark in a comedic context is automatically protected under fair use or parody doctrines without further analysis. Alabama law, like federal law, does not provide an automatic shield for all parodic uses. The parody must be transformative and not create a likelihood of confusion. Simply making a joke about a brand does not grant carte blanche to use its trademark in a manner that could mislead consumers about the source or sponsorship of goods or services. This approach ignores the critical element of consumer perception and the potential for commercial harm to the trademark owner. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a thorough understanding of the relevant Alabama trademark law and the established tests for likelihood of confusion. This involves identifying the key factors courts consider and then gathering evidence to objectively assess each factor. When dealing with parody, it is crucial to distinguish between commentary and commercial exploitation. A quantitative analysis of potential consumer confusion, considering the similarity of marks, commercial nature of the use, and strength of the original mark, provides a robust framework for making informed decisions that respect both intellectual property rights and freedom of expression. Question 11. To address the challenge of a new Alabama-based entertainment franchise seeking to license a well-established music venue's trademark, what is the most prudent approach to ensure the protection of the licensor's brand identity and prevent potential trademark infringement by the franchisee? Option A. Develop a comprehensive trademark licensing agreement that meticulously outlines the scope of the license, mandates strict adherence to the licensor's operational standards and branding guidelines, and incorporates robust quality control mechanisms. Option B. Rely on informal verbal agreements with the franchisee regarding brand usage and operational consistency to maintain flexibility. Option C. Prioritize securing the licensing fee and overlook any minor deviations from the licensor's brand standards to foster a positive initial relationship. Option D. Grant a broad, unrestricted license to the franchisee, allowing them maximum creative freedom in operating the music venue under the licensed trademark. Correct answer is A. Develop a comprehensive trademark licensing agreement that meticulously outlines the scope of the license, mandates strict adherence to the licensor's operational standards and branding guidelines, and incorporates robust quality control mechanisms. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves navigating the complexities of trademark licensing within the entertainment industry in Alabama, specifically concerning the potential for a franchisee to infringe upon the licensor's established brand identity. The core issue is balancing the franchisee's desire for creative freedom with the licensor's need to maintain brand consistency and protect its valuable intellectual property. Alabama law, like other jurisdictions, emphasizes the importance of clear contractual agreements and the protection of trademark rights. Failure to adequately address these aspects can lead to legal disputes, brand dilution, and financial losses for both parties. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the licensing agreement is robust enough to prevent infringement while still allowing for a successful business relationship. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously drafting a comprehensive trademark licensing agreement that clearly defines the scope of the license, outlines specific operational standards, and establishes robust quality control mechanisms. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the potential for trademark infringement by proactively setting boundaries and expectations. Alabama trademark law, while not explicitly detailed in this prompt, generally supports the contractual enforcement of trademark rights. A well-defined agreement, including detailed operational guidelines and quality control provisions, ensures that the franchisee operates within the parameters of the licensed mark, thereby protecting the licensor's brand integrity and preventing unauthorized use or dilution of the trademark. This proactive contractual approach is the most effective way to mitigate legal risks and maintain brand value. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves granting a broad, unrestricted license without any specific operational guidelines or quality control measures. This is professionally unacceptable because it leaves the door wide open for the franchisee to deviate from the licensor's brand standards, potentially leading to trademark infringement and dilution. Without clear directives, the franchisee might adopt practices or offer services that are inconsistent with the established brand image, thereby damaging the licensor's reputation and the value of its trademark. Another incorrect approach is relying solely on informal verbal agreements regarding brand usage. This is a significant ethical and legal failure as it lacks enforceability and provides no concrete protection for the trademark. Verbal agreements are notoriously difficult to prove and are insufficient to safeguard valuable intellectual property rights under Alabama law. Finally, an approach that prioritizes immediate revenue generation over brand protection by overlooking potential trademark issues in the licensing agreement is also professionally unsound. This short-sighted strategy can lead to long-term damage to the brand's reputation and significant legal liabilities, ultimately undermining the profitability of both the licensor and the franchisee. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes due diligence and proactive risk mitigation. This involves thoroughly understanding the specific intellectual property being licensed, the target market, and the operational requirements of the business. The framework should emphasize the creation of clear, comprehensive, and legally sound contracts that anticipate potential issues, such as trademark infringement. Before entering into any licensing or franchising agreement, professionals should conduct thorough legal reviews to ensure compliance with all relevant Alabama laws and industry best practices. The decision-making process should always weigh the potential benefits against the risks, with a strong emphasis on protecting the integrity and value of the licensed intellectual property. Question 12. The review process indicates that a well-known Alabama blues guitarist, celebrated for his unique guitar riffs and signature stage attire, is approached by a company wishing to produce a line of action figures and t-shirts featuring his likeness. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure the guitarist's rights under Alabama law are fully protected? Option A. Accept the company's standard licensing contract without detailed review, believing that as a public figure, the guitarist has limited control over the commercial use of his likeness. Option B. Proceed with a verbal agreement, trusting the company's reputation and assuming the guitarist's public persona implies consent for all commercial uses of his image. Option C. Engage legal counsel specializing in Alabama entertainment law to draft a comprehensive licensing agreement that precisely defines the scope of the license, including the specific elements of the guitarist's identity being used, the products, duration, and territory, while explicitly preserving all rights not granted. Option D. Grant a broad, unrestricted license to the company, allowing them to use the guitarist's image and likeness on any merchandise they deem appropriate, in exchange for a modest upfront payment. The correct answer is C. Engage legal counsel specializing in Alabama entertainment law to draft a comprehensive licensing agreement that precisely defines the scope of the license, including the specific elements of the guitarist's identity being used, the products, duration, and territory, while explicitly preserving all rights not granted. Explanation. The review process indicates a scenario where a prominent Alabama musician, known for his distinctive stage persona and vocal style, is considering licensing his image and likeness for a new line of merchandise. The challenge lies in navigating the specific legal protections afforded by Alabama law regarding the right of publicity, ensuring that any licensing agreement fully respects the musician's exclusive control over the commercial use of his identity. A deep understanding of Alabama's statutory and common law framework is crucial to avoid potential infringement claims and to structure a legally sound and ethically responsible agreement. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the proposed licensing agreement by legal counsel specializing in Alabama entertainment law. This counsel must verify that the agreement clearly defines the scope of the license, specifying exactly which aspects of the musician's identity, e.g., name, likeness, voice, signature style, are being licensed, for what specific products, and for what duration and geographic territory. Crucially, the agreement must explicitly state that the musician retains all rights not expressly granted, and that the licensee acknowledges the musician's inherent right of publicity under Alabama law. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core of the right of publicity, the exclusive right of an individual to control the commercial appropriation of their identity. Alabama law, like many states, recognizes this right, and a properly drafted agreement, guided by legal expertise, is the most effective way to protect it. This ensures compliance with Alabama Code Section 32-8-1 et seq. While this is a traffic safety code, the principle of protecting individual rights extends to common law and other statutes that may not be explicitly listed in a general prompt, and the core concept of control over one's identity is paramount, and relevant common law precedents that protect against unauthorized commercial exploitation. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on a verbal agreement or a loosely drafted contract that fails to specify the precise nature and limitations of the license. This is professionally unacceptable because it leaves significant room for misinterpretation and potential disputes, exposing the musician to claims that his right of publicity has been infringed. Without clear contractual boundaries, the licensee might exceed the intended scope of use, leading to legal action. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that because the musician is a public figure, his right of publicity is automatically diminished or waived. While public figures may have a reduced expectation of privacy in certain contexts, their right to control the commercial use of their identity remains robust under Alabama law. Failing to acknowledge and protect this right through a formal, legally sound agreement is a significant ethical and legal failure. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and the protection of their clients' rights. This involves 1. Identifying the specific legal protections applicable in the relevant jurisdiction, Alabama in this case, particularly concerning the right of publicity. 2. Engaging qualified legal counsel to draft or review all agreements, ensuring they are comprehensive and clearly delineate the rights being granted and retained. 3. Understanding the nuances of the client's identity and how it is commercially valuable. 4. Proactively addressing potential areas of dispute through clear contractual language. Question 13. Examination of the data shows that a music producer in Alabama is creating a commercial jingle for a new beverage. The jingle prominently features a vocal delivery that is strikingly similar to the distinctive style of a famous, deceased Alabama blues musician, and it incorporates a catchphrase famously associated with that musician. The producer has not sought permission from the musician's estate. Which of the following actions represents the most appropriate and legally sound approach for the producer to take to avoid potential legal repercussions in Alabama? Option A. Continue using the vocal style and catchphrase, asserting that the musician's right of publicity, if any, expired upon their death, making the use permissible. Option B. Proceed with using the vocal style and catchphrase, arguing that the jingle is a new creative work, and therefore not subject to any intellectual property claims related to the deceased musician. Option C. Modify the vocal style and catchphrase slightly to create a transformative version, believing this will negate any potential claims of infringement on the deceased musician's persona. Option D. Immediately cease all use of the distinctive vocal style and catchphrase in the jingle, and consult with legal counsel specializing in Alabama entertainment law to determine the necessary steps for obtaining permission from the deceased musician's estate. The correct answer is D. Immediately cease all use of the distinctive vocal style and catchphrase in the jingle and consult with legal counsel specializing in Alabama entertainment law to determine the necessary steps for obtaining permission from the deceased musician's estate. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires distinguishing between two distinct intellectual property rights that can sometimes overlap in their application to creative works and personal likenesses. A music producer in Alabama is using a distinctive vocal style and a recognizable catchphrase associated with a famous deceased Alabama blues musician in a new commercial jingle. The challenge lies in determining which legal framework, right of publicity or copyright, is primarily implicated and how to navigate potential infringement claims. Careful judgment is required to avoid legal liability for both unauthorized use of the musician's persona and potential infringement of any underlying copyrighted musical elements. The best professional approach involves recognizing that the use of the deceased musician's distinctive vocal style and catchphrase primarily implicates the right of publicity, which protects an individual's name, likeness, and other identifying characteristics from unauthorized commercial appropriation. In Alabama, the right of publicity is recognized and can survive the death of the individual, allowing heirs or designated parties to control the commercial use of the deceased's persona. Therefore, the producer must seek permission from the estate of the deceased musician or their legal representatives to use these elements in a commercial context. This approach directly addresses the appropriation of the musician's identity for commercial gain, which is the core concern of the right of publicity. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on copyright law and assume that if the catchphrase and vocal style are not directly copied from a specific copyrighted song, there is no infringement. This fails to acknowledge that the right of publicity protects the persona itself, independent of any specific copyrighted work. Copyright protects the expression of an idea, not the idea or the persona of the creator. Therefore, even if the jingle is musically original and does not infringe on any specific song's copyright, the unauthorized use of the musician's distinctive vocal style and catchphrase would still constitute a violation of their right of publicity. Another incorrect approach would be to argue that because the musician is deceased, their right of publicity has expired. While the duration of post-mortem publicity rights can vary by jurisdiction, Alabama law generally recognizes these rights as descendable. Therefore, assuming the rights have automatically lapsed without legal verification is a significant legal misstep. A further incorrect approach would be to believe that any use of a deceased artist's style or memorable phrases is permissible as long as it is transformative or constitutes parody. While transformative use and parody can be defenses in certain intellectual property contexts, they are not automatic shields against right of publicity claims, especially when the use is for direct commercial advertising, and the intent is to evoke the association with the famous musician to sell a product. The commercial nature of the jingle weighs heavily against such defenses in this context. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes identifying the nature of the intellectual property being used. This involves asking, is the concern the unauthorized use of a person's identity for commercial gain, right of publicity, or is it the unauthorized copying of a specific creative expression, copyright? In cases involving a person's likeness, voice, or distinctive personal characteristics used commercially, the right of publicity should be the primary consideration. If the use involves specific creative works, copyright law becomes paramount. When both are potentially implicated, it is crucial to analyze each right separately and seek appropriate permissions or clearances for all applicable intellectual property rights. Question 14. Upon reviewing an independent filmmaker's proposal in Alabama to create a documentary that incorporates short, uncredited clips of iconic Hollywood movie scenes to illustrate historical trends in cinematic storytelling, what is the most prudent course of action to determine potential fair use implications? Option A. Conduct a detailed analysis of the 4 statutory factors of fair use: purpose and character of the use, nature of the copyrighted work, amount and substantiality of the portion used, and the effect of the use upon the potential market for or value of the copyrighted work, applying them to the specific context of the documentary. Option B. Advise the filmmaker that any use of copyrighted material for educational or artistic purposes is generally permissible under fair use, especially if the original works are well known. Option C. Focus solely on the transformative nature of the documentary, arguing that the filmmaker's intent to comment on cinematic history inherently makes the use of clips fair, regardless of the quantity or market impact. Option D. Recommend that the filmmaker avoid using any copyrighted material altogether to eliminate any risk of infringement, even if it means compromising the documentary's illustrative goals. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed analysis of the 4 statutory factors of fair use: purpose and character of the use, nature of the copyrighted work, amount and substantiality of the portion used, and the effect of the use upon the potential market for or value of the copyrighted work, applying them to the specific context of the documentary. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the creative rights of an artist with the established legal principles of fair use under Alabama law. The artist's desire to express themselves through transformative work must be weighed against the potential infringement of existing copyrighted material. Careful judgment is required to navigate the nuances of fair use, which is not a bright-line rule but a flexible doctrine. The best professional approach involves a thorough analysis of the 4 statutory factors of fair use as codified in Section 107 of the U.S. Copyright Act, which is applicable in Alabama. This approach necessitates evaluating the purpose and character of the use, transformative vs. commercial, the nature of the copyrighted work, the amount and substantiality of the portion used, and the effect of the use upon the potential market for or value of the copyrighted work. By meticulously applying these factors to the specific facts of the artist's proposed work, one can form a reasoned opinion on whether the use is likely to be deemed fair. This systematic evaluation ensures that all relevant legal considerations are addressed, providing a robust defense against potential infringement claims. An incorrect approach would be to assume that any use of copyrighted material for artistic expression is automatically permissible under fair use. This fails to acknowledge that fair use is an exception, not a blanket right, and requires a case-by-case analysis of the statutory factors. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on the transformative nature of the new work without considering the other factors, particularly the market effect. While transformativeness is a significant factor, it is not determinative on its own. Furthermore, relying on the fact that the original work is older or that the artist intends no direct commercial competition with the original work, without a comprehensive assessment of all 4 factors, is insufficient. These approaches ignore the comprehensive legal framework governing fair use and risk exposing the artist to legal liability. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the client's objective and the nature of the copyrighted material involved. This is followed by a detailed factual investigation to gather information relevant to each of the 4 fair use factors. Legal research should then be conducted to understand how courts have applied these factors in similar contexts within Alabama. Finally, a reasoned legal opinion should be formed, articulating the analysis of each factor and the overall conclusion regarding fair use, advising the client on the associated risks and potential strategies. Question 15. When evaluating a proposed name for a new music festival to be held annually in Birmingham, Alabama, focusing on Southern rock music, what is the most crucial factor in determining whether the name can be protected as a trademark under Alabama law? Option A. Whether the name is commonly used in everyday language within the southern United States. Option B. Whether the name is inherently distinctive, such as being arbitrary, fanciful, or suggestive, or if it has acquired secondary meaning among consumers in Alabama as identifying the source of the festival. Option C. Whether the name accurately describes the genre of music being performed at the festival. Option D. Whether the name is appealing to a broad audience of music fans in Alabama. The correct answer is B. Whether the name is inherently distinctive, such as being arbitrary, fanciful, or suggestive, or if it has acquired secondary meaning among consumers in Alabama as identifying the source of the festival. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires distinguishing between a protectable trademark and a descriptive term that is not inherently distinctive. The core issue is whether the proposed mark for a new Alabama-based music festival is likely to be recognized by consumers as identifying the source of the festival's services, rather than merely describing the nature of the event. Careful judgment is required to avoid infringing on existing rights or failing to secure adequate protection for the new venture. The best approach involves a thorough analysis of the proposed mark's distinctiveness in the context of the Alabama entertainment market. This means assessing whether the mark is arbitrary, fanciful, suggestive, or merely descriptive. A mark that is arbitrary, e.g., Apple for computers, or fanciful, e.g., Kodak, is inherently distinctive and immediately protectable. A suggestive mark, e.g., Coppertone for suntan lotion, hints at the product or service without directly describing it and is also protectable. A descriptive mark, e.g., Alabama Blues Festival, describes a characteristic or quality of the service and requires a showing of secondary meaning, i.e., that consumers associate the mark with a specific source to be protectable under Alabama trademark law. The purpose of trademark law in Alabama, as elsewhere, is to prevent consumer confusion about the source of goods or services and to protect the goodwill of businesses. Therefore, a mark that is inherently distinctive or has acquired secondary meaning serves this purpose effectively. An incorrect approach would be to assume that any name associated with a music festival in Alabama is automatically protectable as a trademark. This fails to recognize that descriptive terms, while potentially useful for marketing, do not inherently function as source identifiers and are not protectable without evidence of acquired distinctiveness. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on the popularity of the music genre or the festival's location without considering the distinctiveness of the proposed name itself. The Alabama Code, particularly provisions related to unfair competition and deceptive trade practices, emphasizes the need for a mark to function as a source identifier to warrant protection. Simply having a name related to the event's theme or location does not automatically confer trademark rights. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process when evaluating potential trademarks. This process begins with understanding the client's business and the services being offered. Next, it involves brainstorming potential marks and then rigorously assessing their distinctiveness according to established trademark categories. This assessment should consider the relevant market and consumer perception. If a mark appears descriptive, the professional must advise the client on the need to develop secondary meaning through extensive marketing and use, or to select a more inherently distinctive mark. The ultimate goal is to select a mark that is both legally protectable and effectively serves as a brand identifier, fulfilling the purpose of trademark law in preventing confusion and fostering fair competition within Alabama. Question 16. The analysis reveals that Dixie Delight, a popular brand of artisanal ice cream sold throughout Alabama, is considering expanding its product line to include a new line of gourmet dog treats. The company's marketing team has proposed naming this new product line Dixie Dog Delights. Given the existing brand recognition of Dixie Delight in Alabama, what is the most prudent course of action to avoid potential legal challenges related to trademark infringement and dilution under Alabama law? Option A. Proceed with the Dixie Dog Delights branding, assuming that because the products are for dogs and not humans, there will be no likelihood of consumer confusion with the ice cream brand. Option B. Launch the Dixie Dog Delights line immediately to capitalize on the existing Dixie Delight brand equity and address any potential legal issues only if they arise. Option C. Adopt the Dixie Dog Delights name, as the term Dixie is a common geographical reference and the addition of dog clearly differentiates the product category. Option D. Conduct a thorough trademark search to identify any existing Dixie Dog Delights or similar marks used for pet products in Alabama, and then consult with intellectual property counsel to assess the likelihood of consumer confusion and dilution of the Dixie Delight mark, even if the products are for different species. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough trademark search to identify any existing Dixie Dog Delights or similar marks used for pet products in Alabama, and then consult with intellectual property counsel to assess the likelihood of consumer confusion and dilution of the Dixie Delight mark, even if the products are for different species. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario that is professionally challenging due to the potential for significant financial and reputational damage arising from trademark infringement and dilution claims under Alabama law. The core challenge lies in distinguishing between legitimate competitive use and actions that unfairly exploit or harm the goodwill associated with an established trademark. Careful judgment is required to assess the likelihood of consumer confusion and the potential for dilution of the distinctive quality of the mark. The correct approach involves a thorough legal analysis of the specific facts against the standards set forth in the Lanham Act, as applied in Alabama courts, and relevant Alabama state statutes concerning unfair competition in trademarks. This includes evaluating the strength of the senior mark, the similarity of the marks, the proximity of the goods or services, evidence of actual confusion, the junior user's intent in adopting its mark, and the degree of care likely to be exercised by consumers. Furthermore, it necessitates an assessment of whether the junior use is likely to cause dilution by blurring, weakening the distinctiveness of the mark, or dilution by tarnishment, harming the reputation of the mark, even in the absence of direct competition or consumer confusion. This comprehensive legal evaluation, often requiring consultation with legal counsel specializing in intellectual property law, is crucial for determining the legality of the proposed use and mitigating potential liability. An incorrect approach would be to assume that any use of a similar mark is permissible as long as it is in a different industry or does not directly compete. This fails to account for the broader protections afforded by trademark law, particularly against dilution, which can occur even when there is no likelihood of consumer confusion. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the absence of explicit intent to infringe. While intent can be a factor, it is not a prerequisite for a finding of infringement or dilution. The focus remains on the objective impact of the use on the senior mark's distinctiveness and the likelihood of consumer confusion. Finally, adopting a similar mark simply because it is available or seems clever, without conducting due diligence regarding existing trademarks, is a failure to exercise professional responsibility and can lead to significant legal repercussions. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes proactive legal due diligence. For launching any new product, service, or marketing campaign that involves a distinctive name, logo, or slogan, a comprehensive trademark search should be conducted. This should be followed by a legal assessment of potential infringement and dilution risks. If potential issues are identified, the professional should consult with legal counsel to explore alternative branding strategies or to seek appropriate licensing or permission. This risk-averse, legally informed approach is essential for protecting the business and its intellectual property assets. Question 17. Comparative studies suggest that intellectual property disputes in the entertainment sector often stem from the unauthorized use of existing creative works. A film producer in Alabama is developing a new musical score for a feature film and is inspired by a distinctive melody from a popular song released 10 years ago. The producer believes the melody is highly recognizable and would significantly enhance the emotional impact of a key scene. However, the producer has not contacted the original songwriter or their publisher. What is the most legally sound and ethically responsible course of action for the producer in Alabama? Option A. Proceed with using the melody, altering the lyrics and re-recording the arrangement to create a new version. Option B. Create a new melody that is similar in style and feel to the original, but not an exact copy. Option C. Assume the melody is in the public domain due to its age and use it freely. Option D. Obtain a synchronization license from the original songwriter or their publisher for the use of the melody. The correct answer is D. Obtain a synchronization license from the original songwriter or their publisher for the use of the melody. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential for copyright infringement and the need to balance creative expression with legal protections. The producer must navigate the complexities of intellectual property law in Alabama to avoid legal repercussions while still achieving their artistic vision. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between inspiration and appropriation. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves seeking explicit permission from the original songwriter or their authorized representative for the use of the melody. This approach directly addresses the copyright ownership of the musical composition. Under Alabama law, copyright protection extends to original works of authorship, including musical compositions. Obtaining a license or assignment from the copyright holder ensures legal authorization for the use of the melody, thereby avoiding infringement. This proactive step demonstrates due diligence and respect for intellectual property rights. Incorrect approaches analysis. Using the melody without permission, even with altered lyrics and a different arrangement, constitutes copyright infringement. While an arrangement can be a derivative work, the underlying melody is the core protected element. Alabama law, like federal copyright law, protects the original composition. Altering lyrics or the arrangement does not negate the infringement of the original melody if permission is not obtained. Claiming the melody is public domain without proper verification is a significant legal risk. Public domain status requires definitive proof that the copyright has expired or was never established. Without such proof, assuming public domain status is a violation of copyright law. The burden of proof for public domain status rests on the user, not the copyright holder. Creating a sound-alike version of the melody might seem like a way to avoid direct copying, but it can still lead to claims of infringement if the new version is substantially similar to the original protected melody. This is particularly true if the intent is to evoke the original work. Alabama courts would assess substantial similarity, and a close imitation could still be found infringing. Professional reasoning. Professionals in the entertainment industry should adopt a risk-averse approach when dealing with intellectual property. The decision-making process should begin with identifying the source of creative elements and determining their copyright status. If a work is protected, the primary step is to seek legal counsel to understand licensing requirements and to directly engage with the copyright holder for permission. Documenting all permissions and agreements is crucial. When in doubt, err on the side of caution and obtain proper authorization rather than risking costly litigation. Question 18. The investigation demonstrates that a film production company operating in Alabama intends to use several popular musical compositions in its upcoming feature film. The company has received assurances from a third-party music supervisor that the necessary licenses can be secured, but the supervisor has not provided documentation confirming their authority to license these specific works. The production company is considering proceeding with the use of the music based on these assurances, while also contemplating whether to address any potential copyright issues only if a formal claim is made by a rights holder. What is the most prudent and legally compliant course of action for the Alabama-based film production company to take regarding the use of these musical compositions? Option A. Rely on the widespread availability and prior use of the musical compositions in other media as an indication that they are either in the public domain or can be used freely without formal licensing. Option B. Proceed with using the musical compositions based on the music supervisor's verbal assurances, assuming they have the authority to grant the necessary licenses. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive due diligence investigation to verify the music supervisor's authority and the ownership of the copyrights for each musical composition, and secure written licenses from the rightful copyright holders before using the music. Option D. Utilize the musical compositions without obtaining explicit licenses, operating under the assumption that if a copyright infringement claim arises, the company can then negotiate a settlement or address the issue. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive due diligence investigation to verify the music supervisor's authority and the ownership of the copyrights for each musical composition, and secure written licenses from the rightful copyright holders before using the music. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a potential infringement of copyright law in Alabama, specifically concerning the unauthorized use of musical compositions. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the legal implications of the proposed licensing agreement and identifying potential liabilities for the production company, requiring a nuanced understanding of Alabama's copyright framework and related federal law. Careful judgment is required to avoid significant legal and financial repercussions. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves conducting a thorough due diligence investigation into the ownership and licensing status of the musical compositions. This approach requires verifying that the proposed licensor possesses the legal rights to grant permission for the use of the music in the film. This includes examining existing copyright registrations, reviewing prior licensing agreements, and confirming the chain of title for each composition. This proactive measure directly addresses the core legal requirement of securing valid rights before exploitation, thereby mitigating the risk of copyright infringement under Alabama and federal law. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the licensing agreement based solely on the assurances of the third-party music supervisor, without independent verification. This fails to acknowledge the production company's ultimate responsibility for ensuring it has the legal right to use the music. Relying on a third party's word, without due diligence, exposes the company to significant risk if the supervisor has misrepresented their authority, or if there are undisclosed encumbrances on the copyrights. This approach ignores the fundamental principle of copyright law that requires authorization from the actual copyright holder. Another incorrect approach is to assume that because the music is widely available and has been used in other contexts, it is in the public domain or freely usable. This is a dangerous assumption that overlooks the protections afforded by copyright law. Many popular musical compositions are protected by copyright for extended periods, and their use without permission constitutes infringement. This approach demonstrates a lack of understanding of copyright duration and the necessity of obtaining explicit licenses. A further incorrect approach is to proceed with the use of the music and address any potential copyright issues only if a claim is made. This wait-and-see strategy is highly risky and professionally irresponsible. It ignores the proactive obligations imposed by copyright law and significantly increases the likelihood of costly litigation, statutory damages, and injunctions. Copyright infringement is a violation that can be pursued by the rights holder, and waiting for a claim to be filed does not absolve the infringing party of liability for past and ongoing unauthorized use. Professional reasoning. Professionals in the entertainment industry must adopt a proactive and risk-averse approach to intellectual property matters. This involves understanding that obtaining clear and valid licenses for all creative elements, including music, is a fundamental prerequisite to production and distribution. A robust due diligence process, including legal review of all agreements and verification of rights, is essential. When faced with uncertainty regarding intellectual property ownership or licensing, seeking expert legal counsel specializing in entertainment and copyright law in Alabama is paramount. This ensures compliance with all applicable federal and state laws and protects the production company from potential legal disputes and financial penalties. Question 19. Analysis of a scenario in Alabama where a film producer is interested in developing a screenplay written by an Alabama-based writer. The producer wants exclusive rights to explore the project's feasibility and secure financing for a set period before committing to a full production deal. What contractual approach best balances the producer's need for exploration with the writer's right to compensation and control over their work, while adhering to Alabama's legal framework for entertainment contracts? Option A. Immediately offer the writer a full talent agreement that transfers all rights to the screenplay to the producer, contingent on the producer's commitment to production. Option B. Enter into an option agreement that grants the producer exclusive rights to acquire the screenplay for a specified period in exchange for an option fee, with clear terms for the subsequent acquisition of rights if the producer proceeds. Option C. Draft an option agreement that allows the producer to explore the screenplay, but omits the specific amount of the option fee and the duration of the option period. Option D. Rely on a verbal agreement where the writer verbally grants the producer the right to develop the screenplay, with the understanding that a formal contract will be discussed later if the project moves forward. Correct answer is B. Enter into an option agreement that grants the producer exclusive rights to acquire the screenplay for a specified period in exchange for an option fee, with clear terms for the subsequent acquisition of rights if the producer proceeds. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves navigating the nuances of intellectual property rights and potential future exploitation of creative work. Producer must ensure they secure the necessary rights to develop a project while also providing fair and clear terms to the writer. Missteps can lead to costly legal disputes, reputational damage, and the loss of valuable creative assets. Alabama law, like other jurisdictions, emphasizes clear contractual intent and consideration for the transfer of rights. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves utilizing an option agreement. This approach is correct because it provides a defined period during which the producer can assess the viability of the project and secure financing. Crucially, it requires the producer to pay consideration, the option fee, to the writer for the exclusive right to acquire the full rights later. This protects the writer by compensating them for withholding their work and ensures the producer has a genuine commitment to the project, aligning with Alabama contract law principles that require offer, acceptance, and consideration for a binding agreement. This method clearly delineates the rights being secured and the conditions for their full acquisition. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with development without a formal agreement, relying on a verbal understanding. This is professionally unacceptable because it lacks the clarity and enforceability required by Alabama contract law. Verbal agreements are notoriously difficult to prove, leaving both parties vulnerable to disputes regarding the scope of rights, compensation, and duration. This approach fails to establish a clear offer and acceptance with demonstrable consideration, making it legally precarious. Another incorrect approach is to immediately offer a full talent agreement that transfers all rights without an initial option period. This is professionally problematic because it bypasses the crucial step of allowing the producer to evaluate the project's potential before committing to the full acquisition of rights and associated obligations. It places undue risk on the producer and may lead to the acquisition of rights for a project that ultimately proves unfeasible, potentially violating principles of good faith and fair dealing, implicit in contractual relationships. A further incorrect approach is to draft an option agreement that does not specify a clear option fee or a defined option period. This is professionally unacceptable as it undermines the core purpose of an option agreement. Without a specified fee, there is no clear consideration exchanged for the exclusive right, potentially rendering the agreement unenforceable under Alabama law. Similarly, an undefined period creates ambiguity and fails to provide the necessary certainty for either party regarding the duration of the exclusive negotiation window. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach contract negotiations by first identifying the immediate need, securing the right to develop, and the long-term goal, acquiring full rights if successful. They should then select the contractual mechanism that best balances the interests of both parties and aligns with legal requirements. This involves understanding the purpose of different contract types, such as option agreements for initial exploration and talent agreements for full acquisition. A risk assessment should guide the choice, prioritizing clarity, enforceability, and fair consideration, all within the framework of Alabama's contract and entertainment-related legal principles. Question 20. Consider a scenario where a film production company in Alabama commissions a composer to create an original musical score for a new movie. The contract includes a standard copyright assignment clause. Post-completion, the production company decides to make significant alterations to the score, including removing key melodic passages and reassigning attribution to a studio music director without the composer's consent. Composer's original fee was $75,000. If the composer were to sue and prove damages related to reputational harm and loss of future work, and a court were to award punitive damages for the unauthorized alterations and misattribution, what would be a reasonable estimated total damage award if the reputational damage is assessed at 3 times the original fee, and punitive damages are set at $50,000? Option A, $275,000. Option B, $100,000. Option C, $75,000. Option D, $150,000. The correct answer is A, $275,000. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential for financial gain to conflict with an artist's moral rights, specifically the right of attribution and integrity. In Alabama, while the concept of moral rights is not as extensively codified as in some other jurisdictions, the principles of fairness, good faith, and the protection of an artist's creative work are paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the commercial interests of the production company with the artist's inherent right to be recognized for their creation and to prevent its distortion or mutilation, even after assignment of copyright. The calculation of potential damages requires a nuanced understanding of how the infringement of these rights impacts the artist's reputation and future earning potential, which can be difficult to quantify. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough assessment of the potential damages to the artist's moral rights, considering both direct financial losses and reputational harm. This approach prioritizes the artist's right to attribution and integrity. If the production company fails to credit the composer and makes significant alterations to the score without consent, it infringes upon the composer's moral rights. The calculation of damages should consider the potential loss of future work due to reputational damage, the intrinsic value of the original work, and the emotional distress caused by the unauthorized alterations. A reasonable estimation of damages could be calculated as the sum of a base fee for the original composition, multiplied by a factor representing the reputational damage and loss of future opportunities, plus a punitive component for the breach of good faith. For instance, if the base fee was $50,000 and the reputational damage is estimated to be 5 times that amount, with an additional $25,000 for punitive damages, the total estimated damages would be $50,000 times 2. 5 plus $25,000 equals $125,000 plus $25,000 equals $150,000 000 This approach aligns with the ethical imperative to respect an artist's connection to their work and the legal principles that protect against misattribution and distortion, even in the absence of explicit statutory moral rights provisions in Alabama that mirror those in other countries. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the contractual terms of the copyright assignment, ignoring any potential moral rights. This fails to acknowledge that even with a copyright transfer, an artist may retain certain inherent rights related to their work's integrity and attribution. Alabama law, while not explicitly codifying all moral rights, still operates within a framework that values fair dealing and artistic integrity. Calculating damages based only on the initial contract price for the composition, without considering the impact of non-attribution and alterations, would significantly undervalue the harm done. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the composer's concerns entirely, arguing that once copyright is assigned, the production company has unfettered control. This overlooks the ethical considerations and the potential for legal recourse based on principles of unfair competition or misrepresentation, even if not framed as a direct moral rights violation under Alabama statute. The failure to acknowledge the artist's right to be associated with their work and to prevent its mutilation is a significant ethical lapse. A further incorrect approach would be to offer a token settlement based on a minimal perceived financial loss, such as a small percentage of the original fee, without any consideration for the reputational damage or the intrinsic value of the composer's original artistic contribution. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the broader implications of infringing upon an artist's creative legacy and can lead to protracted legal disputes and further damage to the production company's reputation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk assessment framework that begins with understanding the artist's rights, both contractual and ethical, even in jurisdictions with less explicit moral rights legislation. This involves a thorough review of all agreements, followed by an assessment of the potential impact of any proposed actions on the artist's reputation and future career. When potential infringements are identified, a quantitative and qualitative analysis of damages should be performed, considering all facets of harm. Open and transparent communication with the artist is crucial, aiming for a resolution that respects their creative contributions and minimizes legal and reputational risks for all parties involved.